everybody, and welcome to Salary Negotiation, where we cover everything salary related in the hiring process. And we answer that big question, how to get a high salary at your new job. Now, if you're somebody who's going through a job search process right now, and you're filling in job applications, and you're also going to job interviews, and you're worried that you might not give the best answer when they ask you questions related to salary, well, hopefully this will help you. We're going to cover several things here. First of all, we're going to cover what are your salary expectations when you encounter that question on a job application. And then we're going to cover that same question, what are your salary expectations, when you encounter that question in a job interview. A lot of people don't realize that those are actually two separate things, and you don't give the same answer each time. Now, we're also going to cover the dreaded question, what is your current salary? We're going to address that. And then we're going to talk about salary negotiation, how negotiation works, what you can do, how do you go about doing it, what's its goal, and when do you do it? We're going to cover that. And finally, we're going to cap everything off by talking about what is an appropriate salary to ask for. If you're new to the job market, you're just entering the job market, maybe you're coming out of school, and you don't have a lot of experience with this stuff, and you don't know what's a reasonable salary to ask for or to expect, we're going to cover that. Now, I'm told I have to give a disclaimer to these videos all the time and tell people why you should listen to me. Well, bottom line, for what it's worth, I'm a former CEO. You could probably tell that just by looking at my hair. And I've been a hiring manager for many years. I've hired lots of people from entry-level jobs all the way to executive-level jobs. And on top of that, for the past several years, I've also lectured in universities teaching recruiters in HR programs about not only the whole recruitment and selection process, but also I've taught courses on compensation that deals with salaries and pay and the value of employees and all this kind of stuff. So I feel I can at least speak to this issue. So hopefully this will be some help to people who are looking for jobs right now and you don't know how to approach this sensitive question. In fact, a lot of people are conflicted when they have to answer questions about salary, because on the one hand, everybody feels a certain amount of pressure to lowball your own value. You don't want to be eliminated based on the fact that you asked for too much money. So people have a tendency to want to lowball themselves and work for cheap. But then again, people also want to be paid what they're worth. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense taking a job where you're being paid far below what your value is. And that has problems too. So how do we handle this question? Well, let's start at the beginning, okay? And probably the beginning of the process is when you fill in a job application. And although you can do this online, and that's a very common situation, people still do this not online. They do it in other means too. But we encounter the same problem. And that is that when you're filling in, say, an online form, they've structured the form usually so that you can't avoid this question, you have to answer it, and you have to give a number. And that's the first kind of problem that a lot of people have, is you feel conflicted. Should I put a low value and, maybe not get eliminated because I'm too greedy? Or should I put what I'm actually worth or what I feel I'm worth and, maybe risk getting eliminated because that number is not to their liking? So let's look at this topic first. Okay. Now, first of all, we got to understand the first thing here, and that is why they are asking this question. Now, there's many reasons they can ask you how much money you want, okay? One reason would be if they want to hire you, they want to make you an offer that they feel you will accept. So they want to offer you an amount of money that they think you will want to reasonably accept. And that way you won't reject their offer. Okay, so that's one reason they could be asking you this question. Another reason, obviously, they could be asking you this question is because they're looking to eliminate you as a candidate that just wants too much money. If they feel that, say, the job in question would pay, say, I don't know, $30,000 a year, and you're asking for $100,000 a year, well, it probably makes sense for them to eliminate you because they'll never be able to meet your salary expectations anyway. So, what's the point of wasting time going further down this process, right? So there's many reasons they could be asking this question. Now, here's how it works. Generally, in the early stages of the selection process, where recruiters or hiring managers get a bunch of resumes and a bunch of applications and decide who they're going to want to interview, okay, in the very opening stages, if they ask you this question, they want to know what your salary expectations are. It's not because they're trying to accommodate you. It's because they want to see if they can eliminate you based on a red flag of wanting too much money. Okay, so if they ask this question on the initial job application, that's why they're asking it. They're wanting to eliminate you. And that's why they don't allow you to avoid the question. They don't allow you to give a range. They require a number, or you can't proceed with your application. Okay, so make no mistake, that's what this question is for. It's to eliminate people. Now, I'd like to say something here that I think everyone should take to heart, okay? When you go down the job application process, okay, what a lot of people do is they think of the end result. They think of like the very last stage where they are going to get an offer, and that's what they have in their mind when they fill out the original job application. So they tell themselves, they say, well, I don't want to lowball it too much because I really want this much money, not this much money. So when we get to the stage of them offering me a job, I don't want to have to surprise them with a higher number because that might not go over too well. So I feel that honesty is the best policy, and I'm going to see how much I can get here, and I'm going to put a high number. And some people even justify this to themselves by saying, well, if they weren't prepared to give me a high number anyway, then it's probably a lucky escape, and I shouldn't waste my time talking to them. Now, generally speaking, that's the wrong way to think. It doesn't work like that, okay? How can I put this? Let's think of our own behavior, okay? Let's pretend that someone is going to try to sell you, a phone or a car, like something common. How about a car, okay? Say you're shopping for a new car, and someone says, okay, well, I got 4 possible cars here. One's red, and it costs $50,000. Another one is green, and it costs $10,000. This other one here is blue, and it costs $20,000. And this one over here, it's white, and it costs $60,000. Which one do you want? Now, when you only know this much information, you're probably thinking, okay, well, we can eliminate the one at $60,000 and we can eliminate the one at $50,000. And I'm just going to decide between the $10,000 one and the $20,000 one. Okay. What maybe you haven't discovered if you had taken the trouble to learn more about each of these cars was that the $60,000 car was a Lamborghini and the $50,000 car was a Ferrari, brand new. And had you known this, had you taken the time to look deeper, maybe the higher price tag is justified. So if you're judging purely based on price, you're probably going to eliminate some great options just because they're not the cheapest. And this is a real syndrome. This is sociology, it's part psychology, and it's what a lot of recruiters do. Okay? You could have Albert Einstein applying for a job, and if he wanted $80,000, he might have been eliminated purely on that without anybody taking the trouble to really see who he was or interview him or find out anything more about him. So this is what we're up against, okay? And in fact, like a lot of you guys know, when you apply for a job and you fill out a job application online, a lot of times it goes through some application software that eliminates a lot of applications based on pretty simple criteria like we're talking about, like the number you put in your salary expectations. So, and whenever they have questions that ask you, do you have 5 years experience in this? Do you have, this qualification? A lot of times those questions, if you say no to any of them, the software will eliminate you from the running before it goes any further. So, same idea here. Okay. So instead of thinking about the end result when they offer you a job, everybody should think of getting simply to the next stage of the application process. Okay. It's as simple as that. So what's the answer to this question? If they ask you, what are your salary expectations? And this is a job application and you have to put a number and you can't avoid the question. In my opinion, what I'd recommend is that you put the lowest number you ever would possibly accept if everything that you don't know about this job was perfect. Okay, if this was your dream job, how much money would you require to do it? Okay, because the reality is that when you're having to fill in a job application, you really don't know a lot of details about the job. And so if you don't know any details, maybe just assume those details are exactly what you'd like them to be, and then give a number. Okay, so what you end up with is you have a number that's it's still technically realistic, but hopefully you're not going to be eliminated by putting too high of a number. Okay, now as you learn more details about the job, you can always revise your number. You know, if somebody says, okay, here, I've got a car for sale, and you say, what kind of car is it? You say, don't worry about it. I'm selling it for $5,000. Yes or no? Well, if they're not going to give you any more details, you have to make a decision based on the information you do know. And if the information you do know is not very much, you're perfectly within your rights and within what's reasonable to give a number based on a best case scenario, because they haven't told you much about it. So you can make whatever assumptions you like and then give a number. So that's how I would recommend that you respond to this question. You're giving an accurate number based on the information available, but hopefully this number will not eliminate you because it's too high. Okay. So that would be what I'd recommend if you are answering this question in a job application. Okay. Now, I have a video that goes deeper into this. If you would like more of an explanation, there's some other aspects to this. And see, my camera's backwards. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to put a link to it right here any moment now. So if you want to go deeper into that, check out that video. Okay, now let's move on. Let's talk about how to answer this question if you're in a job interview. Okay, so you're in a job interview, and regardless of whether you already answered this question on your original application or not, okay, you get to the job interview, and one of the things they ask you is they say, what are your salary expectations? This is a very common job interview question. And whether or not you've already answered or not, they usually ask you again. Okay? Now that we're in an interview, you have the freedom to answer this a little bit differently. Okay? You don't have to give a number, and you can skip the question, or you can refuse to answer if you wanted to. That wasn't possible on the application, but now that you're in an interview, you have a lot more freedom to say a lot more things, right? So let's talk about how you answer this question in a job interview. Now, if they say, what are your salary expectations? Okay, the first thing that you got to know about this, once again, is it depends on what stage of the interview process that you're in. Okay, if this is your first interview, it's going to be a little bit of a different thing than if this is the last round of interviews. This is maybe your third and final job interview, and it's down between you and two other candidates, and they're having to make a final decision. Okay, it's a little bit different thing. If you're towards the beginning of the process, if you're in your first job interview and they ask this question to you right off the bat, okay, the reason they're asking you is to try and eliminate you. Because if you said, I need $1 million to do this job, why go any further? Even if this is the perfect candidate, they're never going to be able to offer you that kind of money. So what's the point in wasting everybody's time going further with this? So they're probably going to eliminate you right off the hop. That's why they ask this question. They want to see if your number is too high, and then they're going to eliminate you. Okay, that's what we're up against. Okay, now, if this is the beginning of the process, we have the same problem. And that is that we don't really know, much details about the job. Okay, so I've done a video on this. I'm going to put a link to it. Where is that? right here. I'm looking at a mirror image of myself on the screen here. So right here, check out this video if you want a really in-depth explanation. But the bottom line is that what I'd recommend is you give a 3-part answer, okay? If they ask you this question, the first thing you say is, well, I'm sorry, I would need to know more details about the job before I can really give you an accurate answer, okay? So basically, you don't answer the question, okay? That's the first thing you do. Now, if they move on to the next question and say, okay, fair enough, great, you pass the question. If they don't, you move on to the second stage of this answer, where you flip the question around to them. You say, okay, they say to you, what are your salary expectations? And you say, okay, well, this is an approved position. Someone has signed off on this position. So the salary range for this position must also be approved. So can I ask what it is? What is the salary range for this position? So you flip the question back around at them. Okay, they want you to give a number where you say, well, no, what is the range? Right? Now, sometimes they will actually give you a range. They'll say, oh, well, this position, it could pay anything between this and this. Okay? In which case you say, okay, well, that's perfectly fine with me. Right? And then you pass the question. They can't eliminate you based on your answer because you're fine with whatever range they gave. Now, what may happen is that they also refuse to answer that question. They say, they could play dumb and say, I don't know. I don't know what this job pays. I'm interviewing you for the job, but I have no idea what it pays. But I need to know what amount of money you want. It's a really silly game when recruiters do this. It's all a game. It's all fake. They just don't want to give a number, but yet they want you to give a number. And if you give a number, you lose, because usually what people do is they either give a low number because they're afraid of giving a high number, in which case that's the amount of money they're going to offer you. Or people give a high number and they want to be paid what they're worth, but then they eliminate themselves from the running by giving a high number. So you've just eliminated yourself as a candidate. So that's the problem. So the third answer that you would give, the third part of this, is you would give them a range, and you would start from very low and it would go to very high. Okay? So you'd say, well, look, anything between, $40,000 and $90,000, would be acceptable depending on the details, right? I really don't know much about this job right now. We've only been talking about it for 5 minutes or whatever. So I can't really be more specific than that. It would depend on a lot of details. The more details I know, I might be able to give you a better answer. Okay, so in short, that's how you answer. Number one is to say, well, you avoid the question, okay? You basically say, I don't know. It would depend on the details. I need more information before I'd be able to give you a number. Number two is to flip the question around and say, well, okay, what's the range for this job? Surely you know what the range is if you're interviewing people for the job, right? And let them give you the range, and then you say, yes, that's fine. And if they refuse to do that, the third part is for you to give them a wide range, something starting very low and going very high. Okay? Now, why am I saying this? Why am I recommending people do this? A lot of people wonder that. They think that's complicated and it's, why would you do that? Well, here's the reason. Okay, first of all, number one, we've established that when they ask this question early on, they're doing it to eliminate you. Well, they can't eliminate you if you give a range that starts really low. Okay, they can't say this person wants too much money because you're saying anything from this low amount to this amount here is fine. Okay, so they can't eliminate you. Then, the other thing it does is it easily gives you the leeway to ask for more money later. Okay, you said, hey, anything between this and this, somewhere in there would be fine, would be kind of what I need, right? So you're not committing to a low amount that's going to cause problems for you later down the road if they offer you the job. Okay, so that's what this answer does. It seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, but it's actually a very good way of answering this question, especially if they ask you this question at the very beginning of the process, at an early stage. where all they're trying to do is eliminate you. Okay? Now, I think I already did this, but I'll put that link again right here. Okay? Anywhere now. If you want to go deeper into that situation where they ask you this question in a job interview. Okay, now there is a bit of a footnote here that I have mentioned before previously in other videos, and that is that the first part of the question, if they ask you this, they say, "What's your salary expectations?" and you say, "Well, I would need to know more details about the job before I can answer that." They may call that bluff and they say, "Okay, well, what details do you need?" And that's a silly question. Everybody knows that's a silly question because you need to know everything about the job. Before you can commit to taking a pay, you would need to know all your working conditions, all your compensation, how hard the job is going to be, how demanding, all the conditions. You need to know all that stuff, right? So if they call you on this and they say, "What details do you need?" thinking that they can just tell it to you in a minute, you would say, "Well, I need to have more of a feel for the culture." Okay, more of a feel for the culture. I would need to, that's one sentence that sums it up. Okay, and that's not something they can tell you in a minute. Okay, so it sort of satisfies their rebuttal there a little bit. Okay, now if you don't know what that means, if you don't know what organizational culture is or whatever that, I've gotten questions about this. They say, what does he mean by culture? Well, if that's you, I've done a video that explains what organizational culture is. Okay, it's once again to your advantage to look at it. I'll put a link to that video right here if you want to go deeper into that. Any minute now. Okay, so we've covered how to answer what are your salary expectations, both in a job application and in an interview that's usually towards the beginning of the process. Okay? Now, the next part of this that a lot of people wonder is if you're in a job interview and they ask you, "What is your current salary?" That horrible pointed question, "What is your current salary?" This is something that gets people rather nervous when they get asked this because they don't know what to say. Now, to begin with, okay, officially, it is actually against employment standards regulations laws for people to ask this question of you in some regions. So whether you're in the United States or Canada, Europe, anywhere else in the world, it's going to vary by region whether recruiters are technically allowed to ask you this question or not. Sometimes they're not allowed to ask you it, in which case you would say, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't give that out. That's personal confidential information." Okay? I'm sure you understand. Now, if it is legal to ask this question in your region, okay, and you can usually find out easy enough with a Google search. You just go to Google and you type, "I'm in this country or this region, and can they ask salary requirements?" Just Google that or type it into a search engine of your choice, and hopefully you'll be able to find out pretty easily whether that question is allowed in the region that you're going to be interviewing. Okay? Now let's pretend for the sake of argument that it is allowed and they can ask you this question. Okay? So they've just asked you this question. They said, what's your current salary? This takes a lot of people aback because first of all, some people feel that their salary is personal and confidential. Let's face it. Organizations treat salary information as personal and confidential. That's why when you go work at a place, if you asked your manager, "How much does this other person make?" they won't tell you because it's regarded as personal and confidential. So it's a little bit weird and hypocritical for a recruiter to ask a pointed question of you in a job interview, "What is your current salary?" and you feel a lot of pressure to answer. After all, you want to try and appease these people if you're hoping that they will offer you a job. So you don't want to say, "No, I refuse to answer that question." A lot of people don't want to do that. Okay. Now, a couple of things here. It is a fallacy, okay? And this is based on a comment I received from one of my videos. that you want them to ask you this question early on so that they can eliminate you if they're not prepared to pay what you would like. Okay? A lot of people say, no, I'm glad they asked me that question, because if they don't want to meet my salary requirements, then good riddance. You know, I just saved myself a bunch of wasted time going to interviews, dealing with recruiters, all for a job that's not going to pay what I want. This is a mistake. It's a fallacy, because here's the deal. You know how we were just talking about the car example, where, you know, you want to buy a car and someone says, okay, well, I got 4 cars. This one's 10,000. This one's 20,000. This one's 50,000. This one's 60,000, right? You might eliminate that car based on its 60,000. Oh, you know, why would I pay 60 when I can get one for 10, right? What you didn't know is that car was a Lamborghini. It's worth way more than that, right? You were about to have an amazing deal land on right in your lap. You know, you could get a Lamborghini brand new for $60,000. Maybe the owner selling it had some mental problems, and or they were liquidating, you know, the assets of some company or something. They got this Lamborghini they're offering to you for $60,000. Well, that would have been an amazing deal had you taken it. You could have paid $60,000, turned around a day later, sold the car for $1 million, and then bought yourself another car for $20,000, if that's what you want to do. So, being eliminated early on because you want too much money, that's not the right thing to do. The reality is that companies say that they only want people for cheap, but when they find someone later on that they go deeper to that candidate, they see their value, they see, oh, look what this person has done in the past, look what this person can do. They realize this person is worth a lot more than the minimum amount we were going to pay. If we had to pay in the middle of the range or towards the top of the range, that would be worth it for this candidate. I now see their value. I now want that candidate. And so they are willing to pay much more money later on than what they say in the very beginning. Okay, it's a game. It's a word game. It's a tap dance that people do. Okay, so I see a lot of comments on some of my videos saying, you know, well, I want them to eliminate me early on if they're not going to meet my salary requirements. No, that's not good, because a lot of that is a smokescreen. They actually can meet your salary requirements, but they don't know you yet. They don't know your value. So without knowing the value of something, you don't want to pay more for it than you have to. Okay? You want to get through the process long enough that they start seeing your value. Then they're willing to pay more, and then you can actually get the salary that you want. But you got to get to the later stages for any of that to take place. Okay? Now, another common thing that people have suggested to say here is, if they ask you, what's your current salary, or, you know, how much money do you want? You say, well, I'm happy with market price. Okay? A lot of people say that that's a good answer. I disagree. That's not a good answer. Okay? That's not a good answer for several reasons. Okay? First of all, some jobs are standard. Okay? They're common jobs that you can easily get salary data on. Here's the minimum, here's the maximum, here's the median, like, you know, the salary range. And you can get that for multiple regions, because salaries vary by region. It depends. First of all, it depends on what country you're in. Then it depends on what city you're in or what region you're in. Okay. You know, so some jobs are common enough that you can get a mountain of data, and then you can calculate, you know, minimum, maximum, average salaries for this position. Like, for example, accountant, engineer, corporate lawyer. You know, these are relatively common. Nurse, medical doctor. These are very common jobs. So you can get salary data, and you can find out what the market price is for your region quite easily. However, not all jobs are like that, and a surprising amount of jobs are non-standard. There's, you know, in my hometown, in my city of Winnipeg, Canada, where, you know, you might have, I don't know, 5,000 accountants. So you can get data on accountants in this region. But if you are someone that is an expert on fixing a certain type of furnace that heats factories that was a brand that is no longer made, that has a lot of units out there. They were all bought in the 70s. They're still functioning and, they need service. But that company has gone out of business and it no longer makes them. If you're an expert on fixing that piece of equipment, how are you going to find the market price for that job? There might be 2 of you in the entire city. So there's not enough data to get enough information to calculate average market price, minimum range, maximum range, median. You can't get that. There is no such thing. So you can't always resort to saying, you pay me market price, that's fine. Or you pay me a salary commensurate upon my skills and experience. Well, how do we know how much money that level of skill and experience can command? We don't. We don't have any data on that. You can't prove it one way or another. Okay? So that's the first problem with giving this answer. Okay? The second reason is that if you say, well, hey, you pay me market price based on my skills, I'm fine with that. They say, okay, great. What's market price? Give me a number. Right? So it still doesn't really excuse you from having to give a number and justify it. Okay? And the third thing is that market price is a range. It's a range. It's not a number, it's a range. And so, where are you within the range? Now, if you're an accountant and you say, okay, well, I'm happy with the going rate for accountants, they say, okay, great. Yeah. What amount of money is that? Because that's a range. Accountants can make anything from this amount of money to this amount of money. Where are you in the range? Right? So this is not a great answer. It still leaves you very open to having to give a number, having to give something more concrete. Okay. So a lot of people answer with that, and sometimes it'll work, just like everything will work some of the time. But in most situations, that doesn't work. Okay. It leaves, it's not a great answer. Okay. So let's return to when they ask you, what is your current salary? How do you answer that? Well, the big question here that I first want to get into is, how do you value an employee? Okay? This is a question that companies have to do. Organizations have to do this. They have to place a value on an employee. And from having taught compensation for many years, there is no answer to this. It's a judgment call. It is impossible to scientifically determine that this particular employee is worth X amount of salary. It's not possible to determine that. There's many ways you could value an employee. For example, one way would be to say, okay, how much did it cost them to get this experience and qualifications? If you're a medical doctor, how much did it cost them to go through medical school, right? They apprenticed for several years. How much did that cost them? They weren't really making money. What's the opportunity cost of all that? Nobody's going to go through that if at the end you get a job that pays minimum wage. That doesn't make any sense. So we have to pay commensurate based on the amount of investment in education and experience that person has. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, okay, if you're an employee, how much money have you made for previous companies? If you've made, because of you directly, $1 million a year for the last 5 years for the companies you worked for previously, you could say, well, you're worth $1 million a year. That would be realistic because that's how much money you bring in, right? I could go on. There's about 14 different ways of evaluating an employee, okay? So the question is, there's no easy answer for this, and companies don't know how much you're actually worth. They'll never admit this, but they don't know. All they know is that, well, we seem to be paying these people this much, and they don't seem to leave, so I guess they're worth that amount. But that's not really a confirmation that they're actually worth that amount. So part of the reason that they ask you this question, what's your current salary, is because they don't know how much you're worth. They have no idea how much to pay you. Okay? This is certainly true of recruiters. This is possibly less true of directors of HR and chief financial officers. They might have a bit more insight into this, but everyone underneath They have no idea. So they don't know how much to offer you. What would be reasonable? So in order to determine what would be reasonable for them to offer you, they ask you to tell them how much you made in your last job, and they're going to conclude that that's how much you're worth. Isn't that stupid? It really is. Let's say you were underpaid in your last job. Okay? Let's say you were in school, you were getting an education, and you graduated, and now you're looking for your first job. Well, the previous job you had, you didn't have a degree. You were just doing some manual labor job, during the summer or something. That's not any kind of indication of your value now that you have finished your education. So, yeah, it's just a very flawed way to look at how much somebody is worth. Okay? Now, what's the answer? Finally, what's the answer if they ask you, what's your current salary? If I was asked this question, this is what I would say. Okay? I would say, well, listen, I have a personal policy that I don't disclose my compensation because it's personal, it's also confidential, and there might be some privacy issues there. I'm sure you understand. That's what I would say. Okay? Now, most of the time that will work. They will not push you further. They'll say, well, I need a number. You must give me a number or else, I can't hire you. That's very uncommon to hear that, but I wouldn't say impossible. But that's how I would answer. Because quite frankly, your current salary is none of their business. If they even are allowed to ask you that, it's really not necessary that you give them that. It has no bearing on them determining how much money to pay you. Okay? So that's what I would say to that. Now, if you want to go deeper into this question, if you get asked, what's your current salary? I do have a video on that. Okay? I'll put that right here. Any moment now, you should get a link. You can check that out if you feel like it. Hopefully that helps. Whew. Okay. Now we move on to part 4 of this. Okay, we've covered how to answer what are your salary expectations on a job application. We've talked about how to answer what are your salary expectations in a job interview. We've talked about how to answer what is your current salary in a job interview. Let's now talk about negotiation, salary negotiation. Okay, how this works. Now, we talked earlier about the car example, right? I like to use that example. If someone you want to buy a car and someone doesn't give you any details about it, and you say, I got 4 cars, one's pink, one's blue, one's red, one's orange, and they cost $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $60,000 respectively. Okay. And that's all you know about these cars. Your instinct is going to be to eliminate the most expensive ones and saying, well, I'm interested in the $10,000 one and maybe the $20,000 one. Okay. When you don't know any of the details about some of your options, the only thing you do know is the price. You're going to make your decision based on the price. Okay. In which case, the cheapest person gets hired. Now, generally speaking, that's a bad way to make decisions because, generally speaking, you get what you pay for. If you want someone really good, they're usually not going to come cheap. Now, recruiters have several priorities. Okay, recruiters are people who are tasked with going and filling a position. Okay, now they have to fill a position with somebody qualified. They have to fill a position with somebody that's low risk. They're not going to immediately leave. They can't be crazy. They can't be a criminal. They can't, be untrustworthy and steal from the company and embezzle, and they can't be mentally unstable. They have to be a low risk candidate, and they have to be a talented person so that they perform the job well. But beyond that, an organization, a company, is just like you and me. They don't want to pay any more than they have to get that person. Okay? So not overpaying is also one of their priorities. Okay? So that's how they're entering this. It is one of their priorities. Is it the top priority? No, but it's one of their priorities. Now, it's very easy to determine somebody's price. You just ask them, how much money do you need? And they give you a price. It's just like the cars. You don't know anything about them other than their color and their price. Okay, and when you only know that little bit of information, you tend to make decisions based on the price. But let's say you're a talented person and you have a lot of experience, a lot of skills. You can do a lot for an organization. You can bring them all kinds of new business. You could save them all kinds of money by implementing best practices that you know. Okay, you can add a lot of value to that company. And you want to make it clear that, I may ask for a little bit of money, but I'm definitely worth it. The problem with this is that you need to stay in the game long enough in the job interview process for them to learn this stuff about you. You can't be eliminated in the first round because you will never get a chance to demonstrate your value. So if you want to demonstrate your value, you have to get past the first interview. You have to get through multiple rounds of job interviews that a lot of jobs require so that they can get to know you and see your value. Even if it's something as simple as, they realize that working with you will be a pleasure because you're a very charismatic, very friendly, very agreeable person. Okay? That might not be apparent in interview number 1 where you hardly get a chance to speak. They just fire questions at you and you have to answer these questions in 1 or 2 words and then that's it. The interview's over. You might not even be able to demonstrate your social skills to them. Okay, so the way we get a job with a higher salary is that we first of all have to stay in the game long enough for them to get to know us, to see our value. Okay, they can't just eliminate us based on money at the very beginning. Okay, so that's kind of the beginning of this. Okay, now a common question that a lot of people ask is, if I give a salary range, okay, I say the answer that I said earlier, I said, hey, anything between 40,000 to 90,000, that's fine with me. Somewhere in there will be fine, depending on details. If I give that range, won't they just lowball me and they say, okay, I'll offer them 40,000? Well, okay, technically they may, but chances are they won't, because the idea is that you're giving that range as an answer just so you can get past the first round of interviews so that they can take a closer look at you, so they can get to know you and see what value you can bring to the job and to the role. Okay, once they see the value, hopefully, if you play your cards right, they will want to hire you and they won't have a problem paying you more money because they see that they're getting a lot in return. Okay, that's the idea. So giving a range is not bad. Giving a range is actually a good thing. It allows you to get past that initial round, but it leaves it open so that paying you more money is not unexpected. Okay, now let's give another example here to help illustrate what's going on. I'm sure most of you guys out there are familiar with an auction, right? You've done stuff with eBay or other auction type things, and you bid on an item, right? Here's an item, it's for sale, right? Now, let's pretend that secretly you've decided in your own head, you're not telling anyone, but you've decided, I want that, and I'm prepared to pay up to $100 to get that. Okay? That's what's called a reservation price. So in my head, $100 is my reservation price. So I will pay up to $100 to get that, and I still feel that it's a good deal. Okay? Now, the thing is, you don't disclose that because you're hoping to get it for less than $100, right? So if the bid is currently at $10, right, you might want to bid $10. You might want to bid $11, right? Like I've said before, a better strategy that you often see is people wait till the last minute and then they put in a bid that's just slightly above what the current bid is, right? And the reason you do that is because even though you're prepared to pay up to $100 to get that thing, you're hoping that you can get it for $11 and not have to pay $100, right? If you can get it for $11 That's even better. Doesn't mean that 11 is the highest you'll ever go in your bidding. It just means that that's what you're hoping to get it for. Okay, that's what's happening in a job interview, in the selection process, when it comes to compensation. Okay, if the recruiter can find a talented person who can do the job well and is low risk, but they can get that person for $11 instead of $100, even better. They get regarded as a superstar by their bosses. Okay, so that's another factor at play here. Okay, they're not going to just offer you a super high salary right off the hop. Usually you don't see that. Okay, I'm not saying it never happens, but it's unlikely that you're going to see that. That's not typical. Okay, so this is the situation. Okay, now salary negotiation, how does it work? Well, salary negotiation is like bargaining. Okay, it's like you're trying to get a higher salary. They would like to keep your salary low. You want to keep it as high as possible. Now, just like the auction, where that really happens towards the end of the process, that's exactly how salary negotiation works in a selection process. It happens towards the end. Okay, don't try to negotiate salary at the beginning of the process. They don't know you. They don't know your value. It's the equivalent of the 4 cars where, you know, the $50,000 car, the $60,000 car, they got eliminated right off the bat, right? Because we don't know anything about them. All we know is that they're, you know, whatever color and they're expensive. So forget it. We're going to look at the cheap ones. Okay? You don't negotiate pay and salary at the beginning of the process. What you do is you get past the initial rounds. You go through the rounds of interviews where they actually get to know you. They get into your background. They see your value. They see what you have potential to bring to the organization. Okay. They see how you're an awesome person to work with, that, you know, they would love to work with. The hiring manager sees that if they're in the interview, which is really good if they are. And if they like you, you're in. And then you wait until they've decided that you're better than the other candidates. Okay, you get to the last stage. You get to the last round of interviews. Usually there are 3 rounds of interviews for a lot of professional jobs. The introduction interview, where they just focus on eliminating people. The second round interview, where, you know, they get to know the candidates more. And then the third round interview, where they've pared it down to usually the 3 finalists is usually typical. And then they select the one from those 3 finalists. Okay. So what you want to do is you want to get past the first round, second round, third round. You want to get to the stage where they've offered you a job in writing. Okay. That's the moment. That's the time when you start thinking about salary negotiation. Okay. Because at that point, they've seen your value. They know enough about you. They know what you could bring, and they see that you can bring a lot more than what you cost. And remember, the reality of this thing is that they're prepared to pay up to $100 in our example, but the bid is still like around $11, right? Now, if they can get you for $12, they'll be happy. But if you'll only accept $90, they're still happy. They get the person they wanted. They paid a price that's within their range. It's under their reservation price. And it's a success. Oh, sure, it would have been nicer if they get you for $11, but, you know, $90 is still acceptable. They're just happy that they hired the best person. Okay? So the first thing to understand is that any negotiation for salary occurs after you get a written offer. Okay? Not before. A lot of people make the mistake of trying to negotiate salary before they get an offer. Like, for example, think of the cars. Okay? If you eliminated the $50,000 car and the $60,000 car and you said, I want to know about the $10,000 and the $20,000. Okay? Now, let's say you then find that the $10,000 car, the price has changed. It's gone up to $30,000. Well, the instinct of most people at that point will be like, okay, well, forget it then. Forget the first car. Let's go with the $20,000 car. Okay? They don't know anything about the car at this point. They have no reason to justify a high price. Okay, that only comes after they see your value. Okay, now, just a couple of notes here. There is a double bluff here also that also works. And the double bluff is that you get what you pay for. So if somebody is willing to work for really, really cheap, a lot of people would feel that, okay, well, you get what you pay for. They're willing to work for really cheap. They're probably not worth very much. They probably don't do great work. Whereas this other person here, they cost this much. They're very expensive. Now, without knowing anything more about these two candidates, a lot of people will assume that, okay, the person who's charging a lot of money, they probably do a better job, right? They're probably of greater value. So that also is a factor. If you look for more money at the end when they're already in love with you and they already have decided that they want you, they pick you, and then you ask for a little bit more money, okay? Don't be too shy in doing that, because good people cost money. That's just the law of economics, right? If something has a higher price, assuming it's selling, it usually suggests it has a greater value. So that also is something that applies here. Okay. And once again, I have done a video on this that goes a little bit deeper. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to put a link right here. Okay, so check it out any moment now if you want to go deeper into that. And we're still going. We got one more topic to cover, and that is the fifth part of this. Okay, the fifth question is, what is an appropriate salary? As I said, if you're someone who's just coming out of school and you don't really have a lot of job experience, you don't know what's a reasonable amount of money to ask for or to make, you might be wondering this question: what's appropriate? What's an appropriate amount I should ask for? Okay, if you're going for a professional job like an accountant or something and you're asking for minimum wage, that might not be appropriate, because accountants make generally a lot more than minimum wage. So if you're asking only for minimum wage, that could be a red flag. It might say, like, wait a minute, something might be up with this candidate. Okay, now, like a lot of others have commented, you can easily get salary information on the internet. Okay, there are two very popular websites that have some salary information on it. The first one is Glassdoor, and the other one is Payscale. Excuse me. So you can check out these websites. They're okay. They're semi-accurate. They're not pinpoint accurate. It depends on the region you're looking in, and it depends on the job position you're looking for. They offer free services, but you also can sign up and pay the money, and they give you a deluxe service and all this kind of stuff. But you can check them out. They're of some use. They are good for getting a ballpark amount. But the problem is that if you have a job title that overlaps quite a bit with other job titles, like the word manager, right? I mean, a manager could be anything from like a manager at a McDonald's or a manager at a not-for-profit, all the way up to somebody who manages 10,000 people and, makes well over $1 million in compensation every year. I mean, it varies widely. So it's highly dependent on the terms that you use for the position. Okay, but they are a resource, so check it out. That's a good first step. Enter your region, enter your job position. Excuse me. And it's talking for so long. And they should give you some useful information there. Okay. Now, the other thing here, okay, is when it comes to the question of what is an appropriate salary, just like there's many ways of valuing an employee, there's many ways of pricing somebody's value, okay, somebody's worth. Now, a common way of pricing is called cost plus. And that's how a lot of things that we see in the stores are priced. You say, okay, how much did it cost me to make this thing or to get this thing? And then you add 10%, 20% of a markup, and that's your profit margin. Okay, cost plus. So what you're looking at is that markup. Okay. Now, a lot of people, including a lot of hiring managers, they tend to think like this, especially for lower level jobs. They think like, okay, minimum wage plus whatever, and that's a reasonable amount. Unfortunately, that's not an accurate way of pricing things. Let me give you an example. Okay. Let's say that you own a factory and the factory is producing goods, or I don't know, energy, whatever, day and night, every day, every night, 24/7, 365. Okay. Now it's a big factory. A lot of people work there. And let's pretend that a critical piece of equipment breaks down. Okay. This piece of equipment, let's say it costs $100,000. Okay. It's like a big device and it breaks down and you need to get it fixed. Now, because that piece of equipment is critical, that means that every hour that equipment is down, it's not functioning. That means the entire factory is not producing anything for that time. Now, that could mean that this factory, every hour it's down, it loses $100,000. Okay? Because this one piece of equipment is broken. I've seen this quite often, actually. I used to work in industries where this was common. Now, you send a repairman to go fix that equipment, and the repairman works in a very small company. It might even be a one-person company, okay, a repair person. They go and they fix the equipment. They get there as soon as they can, very quickly, and they take a look at the equipment. They open the back of the equipment. They see a switch, and they go, click. And now the equipment's working. And now the factory is producing again. Now the question is, how much should that repair person charge for what they did? Okay, now let's see. So what they did, it didn't require any tools. It didn't really require any time. They only worked for about, 5 minutes? And they only, they did one thing. It wasn't risky. It wasn't hard. And so they charged the owner of the factory. They say, okay, for my services repairing your equipment last month, I'm going to charge you $100,000. And the owner of the factory gets this and they say, what? $100,000? Are you crazy? You came in, you did 5 minutes worth of work, if that, and then you're charging me $100,000? That's ridiculous. But the thing is, every hour that the factory was down, they were losing $100,000. Maybe they were down for 3 hours before they recognized the problem, called in the repair person, and fixed the problem. So if that repair person had not done that job, maybe the factory would have been down for 12 hours, in which case they would have lost $1.2 million. So if you have to pay $100,000 to avoid losing, say, $1.2 million, that still makes sense, right? This is not cost plus pricing. This is value-based pricing, okay? It's not about cost. It's about the potential to earn money or to save money, okay? Now, when we talk about salaries, we talk about appropriate salaries, okay? The reality is value-based pricing is how you would price employees, okay? There are many different ways of pricing employees and placing value on them. A big one is value-based pricing. That tends to carry more weight than things like cost plus when you're dealing with people, okay? It's about what you can bring to the role. It's about the money you can save and the money you can make, okay? So when you talk about what is an appropriate salary, you've got to start thinking about, okay, how much money could you save a company, or how much money could you make a company by having the skills that you have? Now, some people, when they start thinking like this, they realize, wait a minute, I'm having a huge financial impact on this company. I'm bringing techniques that have, saved a lot of money, that have, brought in more business, and the amount of money that I've brought in, or the amount of money I've saved the company, is way, way more than they're paying me in my salary. So this gives you a lot of leverage, okay? This is one way to look at it that's of value, okay? Now, Let me give you an example. Okay, in real life, if you don't believe me about the factory example, think about lawyers, lawyer fees. I don't know if anyone out there has had the misfortune to have to need a lawyer for anything. Unfortunately, in life, I don't think we can 100% get away from it entirely in our entire lifetime. But yeah, like lawyers, you get lawyers charging things like $800 an hour as like a standard fee for a really good lawyer. Same idea. The lawyer might work for 5 minutes and not really do any research. They just know what to do, so they just do it. It takes 5 minutes. Bam. Their minimum fee would be $400 for half an hour, even though they only worked 5 minutes. Same idea, right? And the reason why people pay it is because if they don't get a good lawyer and they screw up whatever it is that they're doing, it can be far, far more expensive, right? Same with doctors, right? You don't want to cheap out on a doctor because you might die. You know what I'm saying? You want a good doctor when your life is on the line and people are willing to pay for it. So this is value-based pricing. So when you are thinking about what is an appropriate salary for you, think in terms of value-based pricing, okay? Because if you can justify that, that will help you in a job interview. If ever you need to justify the amount of money that you're asking for, you don't even need to really justify it. But if ever you wanted to, value-based pricing is the way to do it. Okay. Now, one last thing I want to say about salary negotiation is that, towards the end of the process where you ask for money, you basically say, I'm going to need this much. Okay. A lot of people think you have to justify it. You have to persuade the other side, the recruiters and the hiring manager, that it makes sense. You don't. You don't have to persuade anyone. This is your position, and if that's what you feel, you don't have to justify it. Now, if you choose to explain, there's no reason why you can't. You just don't have to. If you choose to explain, you can use value-based pricing as a very powerful justification for why you'd want more money. Okay, you could say, like, look, in my previous job, because of some of the policies I implemented or some of the methods I brought in, we saved this much money in a year. Okay, now my salary is this much. We saved this much money because of stuff that I brought in. Okay, because things that I know how to do and I implemented. Okay, or I brought in these customers that generated this much business, right? I'm getting paid this much. Okay, so it's certainly justified. I will be making back that money tenfold for you guys because of this, or something like that. Okay, value-based pricing is a great way to justify any salary requirement that you might have when you get to that offer stage and you're actually negotiating. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. That was a long video. It's over an hour. I don't think I've ever done an hour proper video other than the live stream before. So thank you very much if you're still watching this. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. If you do have any questions or comments, please let me know in the comments. If you want to go deeper in this stuff, I actually have a course called Get Hired. It teaches you a lot about salary negotiation and that kind of thing too. So if you want to go really deep, that's the place to go. I'll put a link in the description. You can check that out if you want. Other than that, always remember, you are awesome. Don't let these people lowball you into paying you peanuts. You're actually have the potential to be worth a ton, and your salary should reflect that. So thank you very much. I wish you nothing but the best, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.